All right, what's going on, everyone? You may have noticed, or maybe you haven't noticed, but it's November. So why is that relevant? Well, we haven't gotten Pioneer Challenger decks. I don't want to ramble too much. I think I've said what I've had to say about this and how frustrating it is, but it looks like they're canceled. I mean, we didn't get standard decks in April. We didn't get Pioneer decks in October. Those are the months that the decks typically release in. We've heard nothing. I have tried to message people at Wizards of the Coast on like social media, but I don't have any pull at all. I can't even get an answer. Like I don't know. But I just wanted to talk about this a little bit because I do think these are pretty important. And one of the frustrating things that I have experienced with these, while complaining about these, I've left some comments on their YouTube channel, on the official YouTube channel, on Reddit and stuff, and I strangely get a lot of comments from people saying like, who cares? There's too many products. No one likes these, which is kind of surprising to me. I guess they didn't sell well. A lot of local game stores would get stuck with them, which makes sense. Like, how many of these are you really gonna sell? Like, if your local game store is pulling like 12 to 15 people, are you really going to sell like 20 or 30 of them? Obviously not. They definitely have like a shelf life, right? They release 6 months later, at least for the standard ones, they're no longer playable, and that is a problem. It has been a problem. I think it should be fixable now, but my argument for that is standard rotates every 3 years now, so there's no reason not to build them with 2-year rotation in mind. You should be able to get I would say like a year and a half out of them. I would assume we were able to get 6 months out of them. And I've talked about this in the past. People complain that they release too close to rotation, but there was an interview that the professor did with Gavin Verhey. I highly recommend checking it. It was years ago. It's like 2 years ago. But he described the process of making those and the combination of waiting for the metagame to settle down, waiting for like tournament results to come in, building the decks, printing them, all the distribution. Yeah, it does take months.
Talk a little bit about why can't we get Challenger decks sooner? Why aren't these out in January? Why aren't these out for Christmas? What a great Christmas gift. I'm going to buy a standard legal Challenger deck. Why do we have to wait so long for them to come out?
So here's the deal. It takes us a long time to make a Magic set or any kind of product. And with Challenger decks, we worked really hard to chop down the processes as far as we could to get down to the bare minimum of 5 months. Okay, the minimum it takes for these guys is 5 months. So from the moment we send the final files out to the people who are printing the cards to the moment they show up in your game store is about 5 months or so, okay? So this leaves you a conundrum because we of course want to get them out in the right window where it makes the most sense, but we also, and this is extraordinarily important, want to make sure that they're relevant standard decks, because otherwise we get back to event decks, which are not what people were looking for and were often misses because we had to make them so far in advance, and those are being made 9 months to a year in advance of when these came out, right? So what works the best for us is to wait and see what happens at the Pro Tour, then quickly work on making the decks, testing and iterating, and getting them out the door. But by waiting until seeing what the Pro Tour results are, that means that it's really hard to get them out much before April. So that's a real trick. So as a consumer, you could have them out earlier, but then that would risk them being less polished, less strong, less standard relevant decks, or you can kind of have them out in this window and have us be able to see the top tournament results. So that's like one of the many decisions we have to make. And at the end of the day, the decision, and one that I agree with, is let's make them as tournament relevant and important as possible, because that is crucial to this product working at all.
So by the time they come out, there's like 6 months left before there's the next rotation. And that's just a problem. That's just a problem with the standard decks. There's not really a fix for that unless you release new decks like on the day of rotation, but at that point they become like planeswalker decks where there's no guarantee that the decks are going to still be playable in the metagame, right? They might not be meta decks. Even if you build current meta decks, you don't know if they're going to be good after a rotation, right? Rotation usually changes the metagame quite a bit, and there's no way to predict what's going to be good and what's not until the metagame settles down. So that's just the problem. But we have 3-year rotation now. Standard lasts an extra year. So I feel like you could release these once per year and you could probably ignore the oldest year of sets. So if you take standard right now, as it sits right now, and you cut off all these sets that are going to rotate next fall, a year from now, that would be Innistrad, both Innistrad sets, Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow, Kamigawa, and Streets of New Capenna, right? Not Dominaria United. So if you take those 4 sets out and you make standard sets with what's left, without question, the decks won't be an accurate representation of standard, but it would give you base decks that are based on tier 1 strategies that'll be good for like the next year and a half, right? You know what? I wasn't planning on doing this. I'm literally gonna start my OBS. I was literally just gonna sit here and ramble for like 15 minutes, but no, let's get a look. All right, we're here. So let's just take a look. I'm gonna open these. Gonna just open them all in another tab. So really quick, if we made this deck, we can't. We lose Topiary Stomper. That's pretty important. I mean, we could replace it with another ramp spell, right? We lose the board sweeper. So you could print this deck. We replace Topiary Stomper with a different ramp spell. Maybe we don't. Maybe we just print it, and a year, like a year from now, you have to replace Topiary Stomper. Like that's fine. All right, next, this would be illegal. This is fine. That's fine. That's illegal. So this deck, I would say, if I'm working for Wizards of the Coast, I'm not printing this deck. I don't think. Well, it's a good deck, but Rafine's rotating. That means if we printed this right now, a year from now, this deck wouldn't be legal, and it's dead without this card. So look, that's the stuff people don't like to hear about, but it's just the facts. That's fine. This is replaceable. This is fine. That's legal. That's legal. Yeah. You could reprint this deck. This is fine. You could print this deck easy. So you make Atraxa Ramp. You make Azoria Soldiers. And by the way, I'm just looking at one deck list. I'm not looking at all of them. Swift Spear, fine. Phoenix Check, fine. Charming Scoundrel, fine. Felden, fine. Questing Druid, fine. Godric, fine. Squeeve, fine. Yep, all of this is fine. You lose Play with Fire and Lightning. Oh no, not Lightning Strike, but Play with Fire, and you lose this. So you could print this deck, and a year from now, people are gonna have to replace this. They're gonna have to find a new burn spell. Totally fine. Golgari Midrange, fine. Tenacious Underdog needs to be replaced. Glissa's fine. Lord Skitter's fine. That's fine. Fine. This was in Innistrad, right? So not fine. Nissa's fine. You need to replace Cut Down, but it's no, that's Dominaria. Yeah, this is all fine. So look, I think you could print decks now, and now that standard rotates slower, and cards are in the format longer. Why not just print these? Like this one gets kind of screwed, right? Actually, this isn't printable because it's built around Onicote Anvil, which would rotate, and a lot of this isn't. I wouldn't print this as a deck, but like you could get 4 decks. You could get 4 decks. Esper Control. This is fine. Jace is fine. Wandering Emperor is not. And then this is all just counter spells and control. You can find replacements for this. This is all fine. This is all fine. You lose. Like Wandering Emperor is huge, but you're probably not printing that anyway. It's an expensive card. It's not that expensive, is it? It's $14. You probably print one of these. You could put one of these in the deck, and I don't know. But I just feel like you could print these, and now that standard rotates, like now is the perfect time to print these, right? Now they're gonna last longer. The biggest complaint about these decks was that they were printed, and then 6 months later they were illegal. But now they're not. Now you get a year and a half out of them. The same time frame of printing them, of making them, right? You wait for standard to rotate. You spend like 6 months. You let the metagame settle. You wait for like major tournament results. You got all your printing and your distribution and all of that stuff. That takes time. It takes time. It takes time to ship. It takes time to make the product. It takes time to print it and manufacture it and ship it out and all that. That does take time, right? It takes time. So 6 months after rotation, you can make the decks. You should be able to modify them to be somewhat rotation proof. And because standard is bigger, there's less rotating cards in these decks, right? As I'm flipping through them, there's 1 and there's 2 and there's 3. This one has like more than usual, but there's less rotating cards in the decks because there's more sets in standard now. There's 3 years worth instead of 2 years. So that means instead of 50% of the format rotating, now only 33% of the format rotates, which means that the deck should be 66% intact, and obviously, generally speaking. And I would think that you'd be able to cut out the sets that are going to rotate in 6 months and still like get a pretty solid deck that's going to be good for the next year and a half. So yeah, I don't know, guys. I wish they still existed, I guess, but I don't know. I guess they don't. We haven't had a Challenger deck release in over a year now. We haven't had standard decks in a year and a half. I obviously am a big fan of the decks. I'm generally a fan of precons in general. I just like that people can buy a deck in a store, rip it out of the box, and play it without any problems. My first 5 years, I would say, pretty close to 5, maybe like 4 years of playing Magic, I didn't only play themed decks, but I still played them, right? I learned to play with like Onslaught themed decks, and then as I built a collection, I built my own decks, but still, like, when a set would release, I would get excited for, like, buying one of the precons, right? I was, like, 4 years into the game, right? I'd been playing it for 4 years. Betrayers of Kamigawa was going to release, and I was excited for, I bought, like, the Oni deck or something, and it was cool, and I was like, I'd been playing for years, and I could build my own deck at that point, but also, like, I just enjoyed playing the precons, and still to this day, like, I think they're good. I think they're good. I think they're good for the game, and I think it's good that they exist. And the fact that there isn't right now a 60 card 1v1 pre-constructed deck that exists, right? It is only Commander. There's no way to buy a 60 card deck that's relevant. I mean, you can buy old ones, of course. You can buy old themed decks and old Planeswalker decks and stuff. That's fine. But there's no standard deck right now. There's no way to buy a pre-constructed standard deck in Magic. And I think that's just incorrect. I just don't think that's a thing that should basically ever exist, and it's kind of crazy that we're at a point in Magic where you cannot buy a pre-constructed standard deck in a box, even a bad one. Like, the theme decks were terrible. I bought them for years. They were terrible. The Planeswalker decks were terrible. I mean, it was nice for casual players to be able to buy a deck and play it, but they weren't like quality decks, right? They were very casual. They were still fine. You could still buy them and play them, but they weren't competitive. I don't even know if we even need competitive decks. I would definitely prefer Challenger decks. I think Challenger decks are amazing. But just like any standard pre-constructed deck, I just feel like that should exist somehow. And we have a 3-year rotation now, so it feels like there shouldn't be an excuse for not having those now. But yeah, I don't know. Just wanted to talk about this. How much more can we talk about Challenger decks? And the answer is, this will probably be my last video. I said that a couple of times now, but at the very least, I will not be talking about Challenger decks until, I guess, April. We'll see if new standard decks release next year. I'm not holding out on that. So yeah, that's all. Thanks for watching, everyone. And I will see you in the next one.